welcome to another episode of Hiring and Empowering Solutions. My name is Molly McGrath, and I am the creator of this revolutionary podcast. Today, we are diving into the conversation of stop adding power to the confusion. This goes for you whether you're the attorney, the entrepreneur, the business owner, the leader, the manager, the employee reporting to an employer or a manager, or an employee working amongst a team with other team members, with other coworkers. And, I cannot tell you how many conversations I sit in, whether internally with our team or externally with managing and leading law firms, whether it be through the hiring process, whether if I'm serving as a fractional CEO or CMO, and or even through sales conversations, when people call me and say, here's what I'm dealing with. The constant terminology I hear is confusion over and over and over again. And so today I want to give you some drive-by coaching, some tips and techniques in regards to number one, eradicating the word confusion from anybody's vocabulary in your organization. I had a coach once where way back when, probably like 25 years ago or so, would constantly say, I don't know. And it was a qualifier for not being responsible for getting what I needed to do my job. And she said to me, what if you did know? And so she said, I want you to remove I don't know from your vocabulary altogether. Those words don't even exist in the English language. So if you did know, what would you know at this point with the information you had? And that really transformed. Honestly, I think that was the launch pad for me, really shifting my mindset, the way I listen, the way I communicate, the way I walk out of meetings with having clarity on what my role is and what my next actions are. And really, for me, I think was one of the greatest gifts she ever gave me, for even seeing that my bosses, and back then when I had bosses, would interact with me and see me differently, because that was never those words weren't even in my vocabulary. So I want to invite you all, and I'm realizing with this word, confusion. So often I hear from people, well, I was confused, or I wasn't clear, or what have you, which takes the responsibility off of the deliverer of information and or direction that, and for the receiver. So isn't whatever role you sit in, all of us play a part, all of us play a role. So if you are having this widespread confusion amongst your employees or outside independent contractors or what have you, I really want you to pay attention to this terminology and the way that people communicate when they say, I wasn't clear, or there was confusion. I wasn't clear is the flip side of confusion. And so transforming your language and teaching everybody that you interact with on how to eradicate confusion, and for you to stop adding power to this, that it's okay that people are constantly confused, or there's constant confusion, or there's constant lack of clarity. And hopefully after this episode, you can walk into your practice, into your business, into your role, into your next conversation, into your next meeting with an awareness of we are no longer adding power to this widespread conversation called confusion and lack of clarity. So how do you do this? In every conversation that you are interacting with verbally, in a meeting, in a Zoom room, in a conference room, or through email communication, which, by the way, email communication is like pouring gasoline on a fire for confusion, because there's so much communication ping pong. That's a whole nother episode of how to eliminate communication ping pong that I think I'm gonna recreate that and bring that one out here next. But how you can stop is, number one, as a culture, as a core value, saying we are an organization of clarity, and we do everything we can to get clarity in every conversation, file, interaction, what have you. So confusion and lack of clarity are no longer vocabulary we're going to use in this law firm. So how you stop adding power to it is having awareness around it. And when you have people say that, you stop it and you say, okay, what would it take for you to get clear? What would it take for you to get clarity? That puts the responsibility back on the other person for active listening, for them reflecting and clarifying and verifying. It also puts responsibility on them to kind of stop and think and take direction and notes much more intentionally and powerfully. So when you are in a conversation with another person, and or if you see all this back and forth going on email, stop it. Don't add any more power to it. When people say, come back at you in an email or a direction with more questions, do a stop, drop, and roll and call a mandatory meeting and just stop the email immediately and use that as one example that you can probably do in 5 different scenarios sitting in your inbox right now. And so when you're in the meeting, in email, wherever you're seeing that people are confused or lacking direction or lacking clarity, because lack of direction just means lack of clarity. So it's either, okay, I'll take responsibility that maybe I wasn't clear in how I was communicating the direction or the request, but also it goes both ways on the receiver as well. So when you are hearing that, one way to do it is at the end of every meeting, even if it's just you and one employee, or if it's in your entire team meeting, that you end it with what we like to call kind of a just wrap up, where you just debrief real quick. Okay, I just want you to clarify what you're doing next. Okay, so I'm just clarifying that I'm calling Susie, then I'm calling the financial advisor, and then I'm going to close the file. You're like, no, whoa, time out. Maybe that is what I said, but the clarification eliminates all chaos and confusion. So in that moment, when you have someone mirror back and reflect back to you what they're hearing, it causes you to be present and to take responsibility for the way that you're leading and giving direction as well. It's such a beautiful thing. This will absolutely transform your employees, your client experience, your process, your people, and ultimately the way you run your practice. It is the difference of people showing up in an adult conversation and taking responsibility for their communication as well as their listening. So to stop adding power to it is to, number one, say no more. This is not even in our vocabulary. Confusion, lack of clarity, and or I wasn't clear or I wasn't sure. All of those are a form of confusion. And honestly, which confusion is the breeding ground for chaos and drama and all these other terms that I hear so often from entrepreneurs and from team members alike. So stop adding the power to it is at every meeting, every direction, every conversation that each person says, okay, to be clear, here's what I'm going to say in debrief in a 1-page headline summary of what I'm asking, what I'm directing, what have you. And then you have the other person reflect back to you. So just mirror back to me, just clarify back to me what your next steps are. That right there will stop adding power to the confusion. I bet my bottom dollar when you start doing this, you're going to have a lot of massive breakdowns, which is a good thing. Don't be frustrated by it. You're going to say, holy smokes. Now I see where we have all these problems and people not following process. Here's where all the problems are on dropping the ball, which is a common term that we hear from people. Here's the problems of not, having follow through. This will be wonderful liquid gold information for you. And then when you do it again, and then you do it again in every conversation, I don't care if it's a drive-by water cooler conversation, or it's a quick Zoom room conversation, or it's an email conversation. In the future, All of your meetings and your directions and your huddles and your conversations will go like that. And communicate that to the next person that you talk to. Say, okay, great. I just want to make sure we're on the same page. So my direction is, and yes, it feels very robotic. Yes, it feels very sterile and militant, what have you. Who cares? Because at the end of the day, you want this as a best practice approach, because the ultimate goal is for the client to get served, for the cash flow to consist and be consistent and to maintain, and for you to not have so much breakdowns within your practice with your people, your process, your production, and your profit. So that'll be going forward. And then when you see these little confusion firebombs running around in your email or your text message or hearing it through the hallways or what have you, stop it immediately. That's how you stop adding power to it, whether you're the business owner or you're the employee. You want to stop it immediately, whoever's on the email thread, and say, guys, real quick, we're going to have a huddle about this. No more email communication. We just need 15 minutes. Can we hop on a Zoom or hop in the conference room, whatever works for your current practice and your current culture and environment, if you're virtual, what have you. And in that moment, show up like leader, whether you're the boss or you're the head paralegal or the head attorney or the client service coordinator that's responsible for carrying this project or task or file home. Take ownership of it and get the confusion out of the conversation and get the clarity and have a conversation. And then you can train people going forward to eliminate the communication and the email ping pong, which I will talk about on our next episode of how to batch that and how to eliminate all that. We all know the inbox, the greatest definition of and the greatest culprit of confusion is email. And now it's moving on to Slack and Microsoft Teams and all this other stuff where there's so much easy access and just real quick, got a minute, which causes the confusion. So do what you can, and what you can to stop adding power to it is to stop the behavior, stop the mindset, and stop the language that confusion and lack of clarity are acceptable. You're going to start hearing that word in a very different light. You're going to be hearing it as a leader. You're going to be hearing it as a coach. You're going to be hearing it as a quality control and process production cop, so to speak, of, oh, that's a culprit of the breakdown. When you hear that word, you hear the behavior and you hear the mindset that it's acceptable. Stop it in the moment. Bring people together. You debrief at the end and say, just to clarify, here is what I'm saying. Here's what the next actions are. Now I want you to verify what you heard so we can all be responsible and be able to accomplish a goal. So let us know how you do. I would love some examples of how you turned this around. Inbox me, send me an email at molly@hiringandempowering.com. Would love to hear your success stories and or where you're getting stopped, where you're getting barriers, where you're getting jammed up once you start trying this, and let us help you, support you with stop adding power to the confusion.